is there going to be a war in the next 3 years in Taiwan, between China and Taiwan?
Well, let me begin by thanking my dear friend Lapsan for advocating for Taiwan. I think the issue that we face is Taiwan is an invisible nation, and if you understood the history that also the ambiguous statehood of Taiwan, you realize that it's an important state that commands so much power and in technology, as well as it's a beacon for democracy, and yet it faces a tremendous threat with a big, fierce neighbor, China. And to your question, whether there will be a war in the next few years, we need to look back why China wants to crash Taiwan. The issue is that we stand bravely as a model of democracy that Chinese society could emulate. And for China to be able to lose control or to project that hope to its people, it becomes a threat or even a challenge to its regime. And to them, the very existence of Taiwan in this world has become such a threat to its regime. And for a long time, China has had the ambition to take over Taiwan. And why the recent years this has become ever more apparent and more fierce is because of the following reasons. One is the democracy that Taiwan represents has, again, project more hope to the people in China to imagine what could a democratic society of Chinese could be. Secondly, Chinese military power and ambition has grown, and so that it is putting into the plan for the next, at least in Xi Jinping's lifetime, to take over Taiwan as his landmark achievement or so-called rejuvenation of a Chinese civilization. So, in thinking about this has become more than just a military operation or adventurism. It has become one big aggressor trying to absorb something that it would become a hope of its people for the future. And so if you were asked this question, the question is whether we would allow it to happen or not. I know U.S. Military general has this timeline of 2027. Admiral Philip Davidson has testified in front of U.S. Senate that be aware of a potential Chinese invasion in 2027. Now, we've gathered intelligence that Xi Jinping has ordered its military to get ready for invasion for 2027, but doesn't mean that it will invade. But the readiness shows that the threat is imminent and is real. And so that's why I think that it requires the whole world to pay attention. Because if anything happens to Taiwan in a Indo-Pacific theater, it would have global rippling effect, not only economically, politically, but also militarily. Taiwan produces 90% of world's most advanced chips, TSMC. And if Taiwan is under blockade or invaded, that means a global semiconductor supply chain disruption. That means your cars, your iPhones, or your advanced AI chips would all be disrupted. And so the cost is just simply too high for such a thing to happen. Whether or not this will happen in the next 3 years, what I worry is not a full-on invasion, but a slimy slice gray zone activities. Right now, Taiwan is being hit 30 million times by cyber attacks on a monthly basis. China takes a massive scan of our public portal on our critical infrastructure to penetrate our public portal and the cyber portal. And this would effectively cripple our society. So the issue is now China would do anything short of war and to paralyze our society, to divide our internal cohesion, and make it hard for Taiwan to stand as one. And so the threat is not really, China, whether it would invade or beachland Taiwan, but how do we detect the gradual, slicey the salami slicing. And if you were to ask me, it would happen gradually but suddenly.
Great. You took 3 of my questions already. Let me break down a few. So you said yes to 3 years, but maybe in kind of less kind of visible war. What can we do to stop it? So we're sitting here and we're saying we don't want it. What can we do?
Well,
Not
I think
me, you.
I think number one is to continue for Taiwan is to make sure that we are able to defend ourselves before others can come to help Taiwan. So we are now bolstering our self-defense with increased defense budget from 2.3% to 3%, and that is a big jump for our nation. And we are also bolstering our asymmetrical capabilities. What I worry is not a shooting war between the islands and China. Missiles attack each other, but more of China launch a large number of drones on Taiwan, and that is what we worry. And so we need to make sure that we have the capability to deter China. And secondly, the big vulnerability for the island is the energy. We rely on 90% of LNG energy import, which means that we only have like 11 to 13 days of a national energy reserve. If Taiwan is under blockade or some sort of energy shipments quarantine imposed by China, it means that on day 7, our island would be shut down, and then our semiconductor industry would stop shipping the chips, and our medical system would be stopped functioning, and then etc. So how do we keep island online and how do we keep island connected? I think it's a big issue. In terms of how the rest of the world can come and help us, I think number one is to continue speak for Taiwan, advocate for Taiwan, and then 30 is to use the technologies or anything that you are doing to help amplify this voice that Taiwan deserve a place in the world. Right now, I begin by saying that we are an invisible nation. It means that we have our own economy, our military, our government, and we don't have a seat in the UN. And we can participate in WHA or we can participate in any sort of international organization. So that really put Taiwan in a challenging situation when we don't have a voice in the world. And despite our important position in the world in technology and democracy.
So I asked you about how you prevent, and you told me that you basically prepare for one. 2 questions on that. One, is it inevitable, or there's still something that the world can do to prevent it? And maybe to back on your question, you're a small island. Taiwan is a very, very big. Do you really think there's a chance for a war between the two of you to work without the rest of the world?
Look, I think the biggest thing is we need to prepare for the worst. I think there are a very divided notion or perception within our society that if China attacks Taiwan and we're gonna surrender or we're gonna pick up our gun to fight. I think there's no question in our mind that we will defend ourselves. But the issue is how. Because if you think about the numbers of the troops or the sheer military power, obviously Taiwan is dwarfed by China. But the way to sustain it and then to make sure we inflict astronomical cost on China if they were to attack Taiwan, and that's the way to go. We need to make Xi Jinping think every day when he wakes up, today is not the day. And the best solution for Taiwan is obviously to maintain the status quo. Now, maintain the status quo to give Xi Jinping no reason to attack. Now, you mentioned about Ukraine. I was just recently in Ukraine visiting the country, the front line with General David Petraeus. I was there to learn about Ukraine's resilience, the whole society resilience, as well as how they use drones and also really quickly kind of makeshift military technologies to adapt the real-time battlefield analytics and then to see what we can learn from the Ukraine's front line. The issue I found are twofold. One is China now is supplying components and parts of drones to Ukraine, and also Ukraine is dependent on the motors and the magnets from China to build their drones. And then China is also manufacturing for Russia. So effectively, China is learning from both sides, both Russia and Ukraine. So how can Taiwan shift this and then help Ukraine pivot away from the dependency on China? I think that's one big issue that we wanted to work on. And secondly is how do we develop a Ukraine-Taiwan defense alliance or back channel so that we can learn from Ukraine's frontline resilience? I think the issue is Taiwan has been by and large under this threat for the last 40 years, but the threat has never loomed so large. But growing up, we've had military drill exercises. We've go to the shelters to hide from the drills. But then we've never really felt that it was real like the way Ukrainians did. So that sense of real urgency, it's what needs to be distilled to our society. And I think as a scholar, as a former politician, we have to face this situation head on. And there's always a concern that if we talk about war too much, the society become warmongering, and then it concerns the stability of our society. But I think the issue is that, again, it will happen gradually and suddenly.
Last one about this, and I'm going to change to technology for a second, but just one more thing. The US sometimes has more kind of leaning towards Taiwan policies that seem like if the war erupts, they're going to take a stand. President Biden actually said explicitly, if China attacks Taiwan, we're going to go to war against China. This is two nations in nuclear war, but this was a statement that was very, very clear. President Trump did not repeat this thing. What's the role of the US in this battle?
Look, I worry about Taiwan is too heavily leaning towards U.S.'s security promises, especially under this administration. I think we have to understand President Trump is an unorthodox politician. I think he's going to seize the opportunity to make deals, and he's going to seize opportunities to exploit. And to him, the value of a partnership is, in a way, it's in a very unconventional sense. And so to us, we have to really look at the lens of what is there to transact in this relationship. If it means that Taiwan provides more opportunity for investment or technological development with the US, so we can more embed it into the US supply chain, I think we are all for it. But we have to know everything comes with a cost, and what is the trade-off? And I think the issue is that during Biden's administration, he had said 4 times that U.S. will come to the defense of Taiwan, and the State Department had walked back 4 times. And so to us, it is not to rely on what one politician will say or would not say, but it is to understand that at a time of crisis, how long can we sustain before others come to our aid? If there were a blockade around the Taiwan Strait, inevitably Japan will be involved, because if China put a chokehold on the South China Sea to block the energy shipment, it would also impact Japan's energy sources too. But if U.S. doesn't signal or mobilize this military bases in Okinawa or in the Japan mainland, it means that we will come with really little resources. So how do we develop that coordination with our allies becomes an issue? And then to your point about President Trump, who is anticipating a upcoming meeting with Xi, and I think we worry that Xi is going to compel President Trump to say things such as U.S. doesn't support Taiwan independence, or U.S. supports or he himself supports a peaceful unification. This type of a political concession is what we worried, and we really need to be concerned about, especially someone like President Trump, who is again unorthodox, going into this negotiation and making a deal, and for whatever the circumstances is, and then we kind of have a reactions to it. Yeah.
one question on a different category. So you said one leverage that Taiwan has is you're the bottleneck for basically TSMC within Taiwan is the bottleneck for all technology. Everything in this room that is powered by is you. First of all, how did Taiwan become that? And isn't that something that you could totally leverage to make the US do whatever you want?
Yeah, so to your question, this is the notion of a silicon shield. And it's basically an argument that because Taiwan produces the most advanced chips, so it will prevent China from attacking because China depends on these advanced chips. But then because of the previous administration, or actually starting from the Trump 1.0 and carrying out through Biden, that the export control has made China unable to get the advanced chips, or at least being able to get the equipment and also high-end chips that they wanted. So the shield is now weakened because now the dependency has also been reduced. But my argument is that 40 years ago, Taiwan made a decision to bet on manufacturing chips. That was when the semiconductor transistor technology was invented here in the United States in Silicon Valley. And US had made a decision to outsource manufacturing of chips to Taiwan. And for a long time, TSMC has singularly focused on manufacturing of chips, where US, you have Intel focusing on the vertical development of the chips, but Taiwan only focuses on manufacturing of it. That's why today the whole world is depending on manufacturing of chips by Taiwan, which is very technologically and capitally extensive. Today, Taiwan's chip manufacturing is 5 to 10 years, or 2 to 3 generations ahead of other competitors. So my argument is that as long as we keep the most advanced chips still made in Taiwan, but diversify the productions globally, I think we'll be fine. Right now, I mentioned that 90% of most advanced chips is made by Taiwan by one company, TSMC. Now that becomes a geopolitical flashpoint. We need to diversify at least 40% overseas, 10% here in the US, 5% in Japan, and another 10% maybe in Europe. So at the time of the God forbidden crisis, we'll still have the chips to supply to the necessary battlefield's needs.
In Taiwan, are there debates on those topics, or the Taiwanese are together kind of saying if the war comes, we're one, or there's like some people say, hey, maybe join the mainland, or maybe we should move the TSMC factories to the US or decrease. Is there a debate inside the country?
Yeah, there is a fierce debate, especially when it comes to TSMC. There's a notion that US is onshoring chips and asking TSMC to relocate to Arizona, and there's a hollowing out effect of our indigenous technology as well as the talent. And also China is able to exploit this debate to drive out the division within our society. So the notion of American skepticism or the American abandonment, that's saying basically once US has successfully to mass produce advanced chips, it will abandon Taiwan, has also been permeating within a certain social fabric within our society. So to China, this is playing to their favor because to them, their best way to conquer Taiwan is divide our society and then make our society so disorganized and divided so they can take over Taiwan without firing a bullet. So this notion that China is exploiting us through the psychological warfare, misinformation, and propaganda has become even more fearsome, I think, in some ways in Taiwanese society. Now, how do we deal with this? I think we need our own agency. Again, if China is able to spread that, Taiwan is relying on US and now US will abandon Taiwan, now we lose our agency to others. And then how do we regain our agency? I think it's to ensure that the world recognizes Taiwan's positions in the world. whether or not politically, but at least I think Taiwan, the world recognizes Taiwan's contribution to the world, and then speak for us, and then we speak for ourselves.
Last question in 2 sentences. You meet with a lot of politicians in the US and trying to kind of make Taiwan less invisible, as you said. Publicly, politicians aren't going to Taiwan. There's no kind of formal. Behind the scenes, when you talk to politicians, are they all in your mind supporting Taiwan and just are unable to say that because of the State Department's view? Like they really are on your side when you talk to them one-to-one?
I think the U.S.'s support for Taiwan is bipartisan. It has been this way, I think, over the last 30 years. But there's a restrictions and limit to what has been said and how it has been done. And I think, again, going back to what I said earlier, we need to rely on ourselves before we can rely on others. So again, making this chips a powerful leverage and making others accessible and dependent on our technology, I think that's the way to go.
Thank you very much, Jason. It definitely made Taiwan's story very, very visible on this stage. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.